What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHogs42 on the internet, and today we have another March of the Machine spoiler that I want to overthink and really break down and see, is it good? And the card I'm talking about today is Jin-Gitaxias. Now you'll note, I just said Jin-Gitaxias. That's actually the card's official name. It's not Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant, it's not Jin-Gitaxias the Core Augur, it's not Jin-Gitaxias Mechanist Mastermind or some other like long-winded title. It's just Jin-Gitaxias. Now we have also seen artwork for a number of the other Praetors from March of the Machine, so it's reasonable to assume this is going to be a convention that we see in a whole cycle of new monocolor Praetors. And that's interesting. I like it. And Jin-Gitaxias is the one where we've seen the whole card. Now, this card is interesting. It is a double-faced card. It's a transforming double-faced card. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of stuff happening here. So let's get into it. So Jin-Gitaxias is 3 blue for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 5/5 with Ward 2. So on-rate stats, good deal. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. And you can pay 3 and a blue, exile Jin-Gitaxias, then return it to the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if you have 7 or more cards in hand. So before we flip it over and go into the back, let's just take a look at the front. It's a decent creature, good stat line, and you draw cards whenever you cast big spells. I don't know about you, but in Commander, I'm casting 3+ spells all the time. And I also do have a number of decks that use Karuga, the Macro Sage, as my companion. In which case, like, by definition, unless you're doing some sneaky stuff with, like, split cards or adventures, every single spell you cast in the entire deck will trigger this thing. So you're drawing additional cards like crazy. Add into the fact that there are a lot of card draw spells that put, you know, that are spells with mana value 3 or greater. So your Thirst for Discoveries, Thirst for Knowledge, those are just drawing additional cards on their own, plus another one off this. And then you also have cards like Silver Scrutiny, Sphinx's Revelation. Those kinds of things are just bananas, so that you can easily get up to that, you know, 7 cards in your hand to flip this thing. So I think this is a very reasonable cost. That said, the needing to have 7 cards in your hand before you can flip it is real. Like, you have to build your deck with that in mind. Otherwise, this thing's never gonna flip. You know, that's not, having 7 cards in your hand in the late game is not easy to pull off. So you need to be aware of that. Now, if you do pull it off, you have 7 cards in your hand and you flip it, what do you get? Boop, 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 boop. We get a saga called The Great Synthesis, which, given the way Phyrexians operate, I don't want to be a part of anything that they think of as the Great Synthesis. That sounds like a bad time to me. Anyway, so this is a saga. It does not have read ahead, so we start at chapter 1 and work our way down. And chapter 1 says, draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size for as long as you control the Great Synthesis. So that means that you get, you know, you have no maximum hand size for the 3 turns that, or the 2 turns that the Great Synthesis itself is on the battlefield. You will note it says as long as you control the Great Synthesis. So you don't have to discard the cards that you get in those 2 turns. You will have to discard beyond that, but, you know, if after chapter 3 on this, but all the same, you had to have at least 7 cards in your hand to flip this thing, so you are drawing at least 7 cards with that chapter 1. Holy crap, that is a lot of cards. Then, chapter 2, return all non-Phyrexian creatures to their owner's hands. So this just resets the board in a very big way, assuming that you're running primarily, if not exclusively, Phyrexians in your deck, knowing that you've got that. So this just bounces everything. Freaking everything. I love that. It's a very powerful effect. It's no joke. Yeah, that's incredible. So in a game of Commander, this resets everything. In more 60 card formats, I don't know that this card is going to see a lot of play. Maybe in Standard. I mean, I'm definitely going to try making it work in Standard. But I think I think it's way too expensive and way too difficult to get here, you know, to this phase for it to be outside of Commander, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that. Be very interested. And then, when you get to chapter 3, you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Exile the Great Synthesis, then return it to the battlefield. And when you return to the battlefield, it flips back to Jin-Gitaxias. So here's the sequence. You have Jin-Gitaxias online. You manage to get up to 7 cards again. You pay the 4. Your opponent hopefully doesn't like kill Jin in response or something like that, because that is a nasty blowout that can happen. But assuming that doesn't happen, and this goes off without a hitch, you flip this over, you draw 7 cards, and you don't have to discard any of them. You then reset the entire board with Chapter 2. You then have any of the mana that you have in your pool to work with for that turn. Great. You can do some cool things, presumably. Then when you get to Chapter 3, you now have Omniscience for the turn. You'll note that doesn't just impact the cards that are in your hand at the start of the turn. This is all spells. You just have Omniscience for the turn. You can cast any spell for free. You'll also note, when you cast spells for free, their mana value is still their mana value, just not paying the cost. And so when Jin-Gitaxias is back face up, if the spells you're casting have mana value 3 or greater, you will draw additional cards as your Omniscience just chaining off with more than a dozen cards in your hand to begin with, and you keep drawing more cards. Like, if there isn't a way for you to win while you're doing that, something has gone horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. Like, that is nothing short of insane. The situation, like, that's the kind of thing that you normally have to pull off 2 or 3 card combos to enable. The fact that you get it all on 1 card is bananas. You get an Omniscience that loads your hand, that continues to draw you cards as you cast spells. That is busted. Busted. So you need spells that you can cast. So what deck am I putting this in? I'm probably not generally, like, the first thing I think of is like as a control finisher, because that kind of setup is so stupid powerful. The problem with that is that in control, you generally want spells that are cheaper than 3 to give you an opportunity to interact with what your opponent's doing. So if you're getting, if you draw a whole mess of cards and they're all Fading Hopes and Negates, like that, sure, that you can do a lot with those in a traditional game, but they don't feed into Jin's ability. So it's going to make that possibility of, if you actually jump through all these hoops, going pretty much infinite at the end there is going to be very difficult to do. So that's not necessarily great. You probably want some number of those cards just so you're not completely dead by turn 3 in most situations, at least in competitive environments. But yeah, this is a wild card. I think I would want this. So where I want to put this is in a blue-based commander shell that is already drawing a ton of cards, with cards like Reliquary Tower, Triskaidekaphile, Font of Endless Water, these cards that give you an unlimited hand size. So I'm already drawing a ton of cards. I already have like no hand size concerns. That way, also in Commander, games can run long and things can take a minute to unfold as you go. So if I get to a point where I have 9 mana available, which is not a crazy proposition in that format, if I have 8+ cards in my hand, I can just play Jin and activate on the exact same turn. That is a very powerful situation, because then immediately we get the Great Synthesis, we're cruising down the chain, and life is good. That's definitely where I want to be with this, but setting that up is difficult. So setting that up is very difficult. I don't think this is going to make any meaningful competitive waves in like Standard, Pioneer, Modern, any of that jazz. I don't see it. I think it's way too expensive. It's also very fragile. The Ward 2 is super helpful. It absolutely is. But, it can, you can find yourself in a situation where it still dies to, like, yeah, their Infernal Grasps or whatever cost 4 instead of 2, but they still take them out. And you lose a lot. So the Ward is meaningful, but it's not foolproof. It's not the be-all, end-all. So, I don't know. I like the card. I think it's interesting. It definitely fits in a situation where you can protect it, like hold mana back for counter spells. Don't just run this out on 5 and expect it to work out for you. It's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. But yes, draw spells. Draw spells, draw spells, draw spells. You need to be drawing an obscene number of cards if you're rocking this in your deck. I also would not put this as your commander in a commander game, because if your opponents see it coming, they are going to tech against it. They're going to hold up removal to deal with Jin. That said, if you drop Jin-Gitaxias and manage to flip him into the Great Synthesis, and then your opponent like disenchants the Great Synthesis or something of that nature, that's a little bit of a bummer, but you did draw 7 cards off it. So, could be worse. Anyway, I think the card is interesting, but I don't think it's great, is really the bottom line. I'm going to try to build stuff around it, but I don't anticipate it being a huge player. Also in Limited, actually in Limited, it's a 5/5 for 5 with Ward 2 that can potentially draw you a card or two. So it's funny, I think if you're playing Limited, now we haven't seen the rest of March of the Machine, so I'm not sure how fast is that environment going to be, what cards are going to be good in that setting. We just don't know yet. But honestly, I think this is actually probably going to be a pretty good pickup with the expectation that you never hit that second mode, that you never flip it. Because on the front face, you still have a 5/5 in blue with Ward 2 that can draw you cards when you cast other spells. That's not bad, you know? Just that guy can still get the job done. You know, I have a feeling it's going to be one of the least sexy mythics you could pull in Limited, but it's not bad. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out the video. I appreciate it very, very much. Also, I do apologize. This actually came out a little bit later than I had planned. My area got hit with a really nasty ice storm last week, and I was without power for quite a few days, and I felt it. So I apologize for the delay in getting this out. I've got more of these episodes coming. Don't you worry. But in the meantime, say good to each other, and I'll catch you on the next one.